it's basically like March Madness, one and done. And so that intensity, that anxiety really, like to get it done, and for it to build up to that last 3 minutes for me was some storybook stuff. And obviously I brought some hardware.
Brought us a little present?
Got that to remember it by. So yeah, it was definitely a great first and probably only experience.
One of the first videos on the checkup detailed how this year's Team USA was the most stacked roster of all time. They had everyone there, and yet they barely got it done. The world is catching up, and by catching up, we mean literally in direct contention. This is a global game, and after the performance that we saw, it has me thinking. And hear me out before you come at me in the comments. France should be considered an equal to the United States to win the gold medal in the 2028 Olympic Games. Does that sound crazy to you? I don't blame you. Let's dive into it a little bit. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and let us know your thoughts on the video in the comments below.
Hey yo, check up.
With the exception of 2004, Team USA has won every Olympic gold medal for basketball since 1992. That's 8 out of 9 and 5 in a row. But unless you're burying your head in some bizarre algorithm or Reddit thread, you know that things are trending in a global direction. This loaded USA incarnation, the Avengers, was a missed open 3 away from going down 5 points to Serbia with only a minute left in the semifinal. Steph, LeBron, Embiid, and KD had to save the day throughout the game. Bogdan Bogdanovic would add that the refs were another savior for Team USA. Against France, the US needed Steph to go full-on night-night avalanche mode to close it out. And it's only going to get harder for the USA. Victor Wembanyama is 20 years old, and his offense is going to be wildly improved by 2028. He's already the most disruptive defensive player in the world, and he's just getting started. Let that sink in. Around him, France is beginning to dominate the draft, with the top 2 picks of the 2024 draft and the number 6 pick to boot. Quick aside, why is France making such strides so rapidly? To me, you have to look at their developmental system, as the government, French basketball, academy system, and a strong national league all contribute in closing the gap to the USA. It speaks volumes that projected top 5 pick in the 2025 draft, Nolan Traore, is choosing to stay in France over the NCAA because he thinks it'll better serve his progression as a player. For one example of it, 20 hand-picked French players go to the elite Parisian boarding school INSEP to work on skill development and play as a team. Famous alumni include Tony Parker and Evan Fournier. While at the school, they get to play against professionals earlier than they would in the US and move up in the ranks as best fits their long-term trajectory. Other players like Wembanyama come through academies inspired by INSEP's model, where they can play at various levels in the French league as well. It's fair to wonder if this model is a better route than the general mishmash choose-your-own-adventure world that American teenagers have to go through, like public and private high schools, colleges, AAUs, camps, and overtime elite. It's clear that the French system is creating players that thrive in the international game. With Wemby in the middle, capable of carrying his teammates, strong role players can end up looking like stars, as we saw in the Olympics. Garshawn Yabusele was an unequivocal NBA bust, but the Dancing Bear was posterizing LeBron and giving Team USA fits. Ditto Nando De Colo, who couldn't cut it in the NBA, but at age 37 was making plays in the clutch. Congrats to Yabu on landing with Philly, by the way. For Serbia, you saw how lethal Bogdan Bogdanovic became with all the focus on Jokic. Not to mention some of the guys whose names you hadn't heard of who were drilling it from deep. Did you expect the likes of Alexa Avramovic, Awagni Dobrovic, and Filip Petrovski to be pushing the Avengers to the brink? You can get away with a lot in a 40-minute game when you have the best player on the floor and he is Jokic's level of unselfish and skilled. Worse for the Americans. All the guys I mentioned who bailed Team USA out time and time again are question marks for 2028. And looking at the Team USA pipeline, there is a real chance they will be taking on Wemby without a top 5 player in the world at that time. By then, which American do you think breaks up the chalk top 5 of Wemby, Luka, Shea, Jokic, and Giannis? Maybe Ant? Mr. DNP Jason Tatum? Alright, that might have been uncalled for. I have a couple thoughts there. We'll do a video about that later. Worse is, it seems Team USA is still looking at the competition dismissively, thinking that minor events like the 2027 FIBA World Cup or qualifying are unworthy of their presence. Ant said hell not to playing in those, despite the fact that it no longer even registers when America gets beat in these tournaments. Teams like France are building chemistry, while Team USA has to figure out roles and lineups on the fly. The point being, Grant Hill has to get the best roster possible to beat France and the rest of the world. He'll need to win with depth, not a singular superstar. This team needs shooting and smart roster construction because it's probably not going to mesh immediately. The heart and soul of the Avengers is probably riding off into the sunset. So let's do our best Grant Hill impression and get to work on building a team that could have enough to take down Wemby and France. Let's begin with the decisions that Grant Hill will find the easiest, the locks from his defending Olympic champions. Devin Booker was the unsung hero for this squad, pouring in threes, pressuring the ball, and looking completely at home. He's back without a second thought. Anthony Edwards wasn't as consistent, but his explosiveness and infectious energy guarantees him another run at it. He'll be 27 ahead of the LA Olympics, and he'll be perfectly in his prime to star for Team USA. Tyrese Halliburton barely played, but he was a good soldier the whole way and poked fun at his getting an A on the class project without lifting a finger experience. I see him back and doing his best to have a Steph-like barrage when given the chance. So the guards are pretty fortified to begin with 3 returners locked and loaded. Next, Bam Adebayo was effective in his role and never made a stink about playing time or opportunity. He should still be well within his prime and should have a slot waiting for him, especially if Spo moves to head coach as expected. Last, Anthony Davis will be 35, but he has expressed interest and he should be there to rep the LA teams. His defense, rebounding, and activity in the paint were huge in Paris, and even at an advanced age, he should be able to play all out in limited minutes. So we have 3 guards and 2 big Sona. What about the rest of this year's team? Drew Holiday will be 38, and while he has aged like fine wine, this feels like the end of his run. Joining Team USA after 2 title runs and making key contributions will definitely be mentioned in his Hall of Fame induction. Derek White was a late call-up and was effective in his role as a pest, distributor, and knockdown shooter, but he still feels doubtful as a first choice at age 34 unless there's an injury. That being said, if there is an injury, he's probably getting that call. Steph was giving off major one-and-done vibes, so I'm ruling him out. Coming back after that unforgettable performance in the medal round would give us all MJ on the Wizard vibes, and no one wants that. Joel Embiid will be 34, and with his injury history, it's hard to take health for granted. He also had a mixed Team USA experience with uneven play and minutes. He's considering representing Cameroon, which would require Team USA's blessing. For even broaching that, I'm gonna put him up as doubtful, and I don't like the matchup versus Wemby anyway. But sign me up to see him and Pascal Siakam tearing it up for Cameroon. Jason Tatum's situation got ugly online, to say the least. His mom and the city of Boston have a bone to pick with new public enemy number 1, Steve Kerr. Officially, Tatum has said that it's very possible he could be back. 4 years is a long time to heal hurt feelings, and despite all the current awkwardness, I do see Tatum on the roster. It's easy to forget that he was a key member of the Tokyo team. LeBron will be 43 years old ahead of a home Olympics in LA. 43 years old feels like an immediate write-off, but this is LeBron James we're talking about. Has anyone defied Father Time more? Has anyone less liked being out of the mix when the whole basketball world is watching? Cue each and every NBA Finals he's not in when he makes headlines?
I'm so fucking mad at the same time that I am not his running mate anymore.
Around his love of playing with Kyrie or his eventual retirement or whatever else he can come up with. LeBron hates being on the sidelines. That being said, I just can't see it. I'd love to see the King prove me wrong though. Watching LeBron play bully ball against dudes half his age in front of LA crowds, I could dig that. KD will be 39, and of course his body has been riddled with injuries in recent years. He was non-committal when asked about LA, but I am going to surprise you here. I'm putting him on the roster. Give him 8 to 10 minutes each half to torch teams with his shot making. The guy's the Olympic scoring champ for a reason, and he'll still be able to fill it up in spurts. It feels like another notch on his belt to put his Team USA records more out of reach, and I have no doubt that he will still be giving teams fits in 2028. So if you're keeping track at home, we've locked in 7 slots so far. 3 guards in Ant, Booker, and Halliburton, 2 bigger wings in KD and Tatum, and 2 bigs in Bam and AD. That leaves us 5 spots to play with in our bid to hold off this French invasion. Let's start with the biggest snubs from this year's roster, the Jaylens. Jaylen Brown and Jalen Brunson. Grant Hill has said publicly that he plans on chatting with Jaylen Brown face-to-face about the whole saga. If Nike was truly part of his exclusion, that friction isn't going anywhere, and Jaylen will be 31 for the LA games. Adding age as a possible justification for passing on him again. Jaylen's a proud guy, and it sure seems like he took the snub personally and thought that Grant Hill's dismissal of Nike's involvement was disrespectful. If I'm honest, I don't actually see this one getting resolved. Jalen Brunson, meanwhile, is a much easier situation. He was no doubt bummed by being left off, and probably even more annoyed when Halliburton barely saw the floor. The team needs to replace Steph's high-volume, efficient shooting, and Brunson can be that guy. Expect him to continue to thrive on a fun Knicks team and bolster his case. So with the Jaylens out of the way, we're down to 4 roster spots. Who are some of the young players who will be approaching their prime and ready to lock down a more major role on this team? My first pick is Paolo Banchero. The team needs a little more youth at this slot with KD and Bam. Paolo adds more offensive firepower than Bam and could end up playing major minutes. He averaged over 12 points a game in the 2023 FIBA World Cup and will be 25 years old by 2028 and likely a superstar in the NBA. Next, I'll stay big with Chet Holmgren. If this team is on a collision course with Wemby in France, is there anyone you'd rather have to counter that than Chet? While he's never played for a senior USA team, expect that to change soon. So now, with our final 2 spots, I'll try to think like Grant Hill and the Team USA brass. For at least one of those spots, they'll want defense, versatility, and 3-point shooting. It seems like they'd want a guy who's not used to being the first option on their team. So who fits that bill? Chet's teammate, Jalen Williams, is the pick for me. He shot 43% on threes this year, while impressing with his two-way play. This feels like the successor pick to the Drew Holiday role. Could Desmond Bane or Mikal Bridges beat out Jalen Williams for this slot? Can't rule it out, but I'm leaning towards Williams for now. This last pick is nearly impossible to project, as some of the biggest question marks start to get involved. Let's run through some of them. Zion Williamson has the ceiling to be here, and nobody would be complaining at all if he was bouncing out of the gym while repping the Stars and Stripes. Will he be healthy, in shape, and living up to his potential in 2028? The second pick in his same NBA draft, Ja Morant, has all the talent to be on this squad and write his own redemption story. Team USA will be very conscious of team chemistry and image, though, as the Olympic hosts where talent is not an issue. The question is, can Ja put together a few productive, drama-free years ahead of the team selection? Tyrese Maxey and De'Aaron Fox are next up for me. It feels like it'll be a battle between them and the guys like Brunson, Halliburton, and Ja to land those last few guard spots. I've given those earlier guys the nod for now, but don't be surprised if things change. Maxey and Fox continue to rewrite their own ceilings. One final idea for the slot I gave to Paolo is for a guy like Jaren Jackson or Evan Mobley. I cringe a bit thinking about Jaren and the FIBA refs, but these guys could certainly step in as defensive anchors who can hit behind the 3-point line as well. But I don't see Grant Hill and Team USA being conventional with this final roster spot at all. Ultimately, I think Team USA will go for a more enticing name, someone they see as a bridge to the future, and who could also be there to anchor or redeem Team 2 if necessary. A guy who they believe could be the inheritor of the title as the best player in the world when that basketball world is now dominated by foreigners like Luka, Giannis, and Jokic. You probably guessed it. Give me Cooper Flagg. This pick would buck Team USA's current trend of skipping on younger guys. Flagg will only be 21 by the LA Olympics. Anthony Davis is the sole non-injury replacement under 22 since 2004. But this, like the brow, is a special case. Flagg has already held his own versus Team USA in scrimmages with the select team at age 17. His hoops IQ and skill level are next level. With 4 more years of development, why not groom this prodigy to be the future of Team USA? But would Flagg be skipping the line over more deserving players? To me, not really. Especially if he's a high-quality NBA player by that time. I didn't see anyone complaining that Anthony Edwards, at age 23, shouldn't have been there. It's not that different at all. Guys who look like they could be the future of the league get to cut in line. So while we're making guesses, what would the starting 5 and rotation look like? For the starting lineup, I'll go with Halliburton, Booker, Edwards, Tatum, and Davis. If the coaching staff follows suit from this year, they'll roll out a bench group with 5 completely different guys. The bench 5 I see subbing in together would be Brunson, Jalen Williams, Banchero, Chet, and Durant. Apologies to Bam and Cooper Flagg. I see their playing time as a little inconsistent, somewhat understandably. But I also see both guys taking that fine. Overall, a completely stacked roster, but one without the superstar power and track record of international or NBA Finals dominance that the Avengers had. Is that roster and starting 5 good enough to make me look silly for hyping up France? I don't think so. France will have the following guys in place for 2028. Let's start with Wemby, no introduction needed. In LA, he'll have way more talent around him than the Paris edition had. The number 1 pick in the 2024 draft, Zachary Rizasher, a rangy wing who can shoot. The number 2 pick in the same draft, Alex Sarr, a dynamic rim protector who could make scoring on France a nightmare. Add in number 6 overall pick, Tijan Salon, who is an athletic wing who should be able to thrive in transition. Filling in the hole at guard that held back Team France in the Olympics could be Nolan Traore. He's likely a top 5 pick in next year's loaded draft and should provide the playmaking that France lacked this year. Still in the fold will be Yabusele, who showed that you don't have to be an NBA standout to make it work versus Team USA. Matthias Lesor also flashed. But more exciting for France is the fact that, outside of the guys I've mentioned so far, there are 8 French players 22 years or younger on NBA rosters. France doesn't need those guys to turn into stars or even top rotation guys to play a key role on the team. And sure, Rudy Gobert might be hanging around too. To be clear, I am asking a lot from a really young French team. But at the same time, isn't that what we're doing with a mostly new batch of Americans? We can't ignore the trend, which is that, relative to the talent gap, Team USA tends to underachieve in the Olympics while others seem to overachieve. While I wouldn't go so far as to say that America is experiencing a talent drought, a guy just hasn't emerged who belongs in the conversation as the best player in the world. Meanwhile, other countries, notably France, have experienced talent booms that now threaten the mighty USA. And remember that streak? 8 out of 9 Olympic gold medals since 2000? I can't imagine the rest of the world is that thrilled about that. Team USA is still at the top of the food chain, but they will continue to get the best shot of every opponent that they play. Nothing lasts forever. The 2028 Olympics might just be the perfect storm for a Wemby-led France to shock the world.